Okay, let me just clear my throat. I'm dialing in from the home office today. Okay, so I'm dialing in from the home office today. A bit more quiet than the studio, but the rain is hitting the window just right.
I love that. It's cozy. Though honestly, I'm still a little bit spooked after that ritual Paco did the other night. The wind was just aggressive.
It was intense. But hey, speaking of things being aggressive or, well, transformative, we are diving right into the heart of the 19th century spiritual algorithm. We're looking at how this whole modern occult scene wasn't just random magic, but a deliberate engineered reconstruction of old secrets.
And today we're looking at the blueprints. We're moving through the French Revival, this era, where everything from alchemy to hypnotism was being coded into a new system.
Right, and the book starts us in Avignon. There's this group called the Illuminés d'Avignon. It's a massive network of masons, doctors, and professors.
It sounds like a much more organized version of the secret society trope we see in movies.
Exactly. And Mackintosh points to the specific manuscript from one of their leaders, Dr. Bouge. It lays out the actual programming for the great work literally. Look at how he describes the alchemy here. He says you take 10 parts philosophical mercury and 1 part gold, seal it in a vessel, and just wait.
Wait, he says it turns blacker than the blackness of blessed Raymond Lully.
Yeah, the head of the raven. But then, after 40 days, it shifts. It goes through this stage of slags, then turns white, whiten the mallow, it says, and then you get this beautiful swirling peacock's tail of colors.
That sounds less like a chemistry experiment and enough like a psychedelic trip.
It's meant to be. It's about stages of transformation, and the goal? A final intense heat that turns everything red after 9 months. It's a precise, timed process. It's an algorithm for matter.
It's wild how much structure they were trying to impose on the universe. But then the book moves from the laboratory to the courtroom and the theater, like Cagliostro.
Oh, man, Cagliostro. The guy was a walking piece of performance art. He claimed he'd been initiated into Egyptian mysteries and could literally turn base metals into gold.
He even claimed he was 2,000 years old.
I mean, talk about an inflated ego. But the fascinating part is how he brought women into the ritual space the high society ladies of Paris attending ceremonies at the Temple of Isis. He was making the esoteric fashionable.
It's like he was the first influencer, but with much higher stakes.
Speaking of stakes, we have to talk about Mesmer. This is where the science meets the magic. He proposed animal magnetism, this idea of a universal fluid that connects everything. Planets, tides, even our own bodies.
Right, and he used these huge oak barrels with iron rods sticking out of them. Patients would sit in the dark, holding hands, trying to circulate this fluid.
It sounds totally absurd, but look at what he's claiming. He says this fluid is everywhere so that no void remains. It's the original cloud computing of the soul. He believed he could use it to trigger a crisis to cure disease.
It's so much like the digital networks we use today, everything interconnected, no gaps in the field. Even if the fluid turned out to be a placebo.
Even the medical faculties in Vienna and Paris rejected him. They called it a fake, but you can't deny the vibe it created. It set the stage for everything else.
Like the poet Cazada. Now, that is where it gets truly dark.
This is the part that actually gave me chills when I read it. Cazot was part of the Order of the Elect Cohen, and at a dinner in 1788, he basically predicted the French Revolution.
And he didn't just say things will get bad, he went person by person.
Yeah, he told one guest he'd die in a prison cell from poison. He told another, a famous aristocrat, that he'd die by his own hand, cutting his veins 22 times.
That is terrifying.
It gets worse. He told the astronomer Bailly that he'd die on the scaffold at the hands of a mob. And every single one of it, every single prediction came true within 6 years. The revolution arrived and the guillotine took them all, exactly as he said.
It's like he wasn't just predicting the future, he was reading the code of the coming chaos.
Exactly, and that's the point. This whole era, the alchemists, the hypnotists, the prophets, they were all trying to decode a world that was about to explode. It's like they were trying to predict the exact trajectory of a falling object before it even left the hand.
It's chilling, Seth. Truly, we just talked about Cazode predicting the deaths of aristocrats, but now we're seeing Cagliostro doing the same thing with, what? Numerology?
Yeah, look at this. He's calculating. He takes the numbers and the names of Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, runs the algorithm, and boom death on the scaffold. He even predicts the Princess de Lamballe will be killed by bandits on a specific street.
And the book says it all came true. But then he goes even further, doesn't he? He predicts the rise of Napoleon.
He does. He says the successor to the Bourbons will be Napoleon Bonaparte, and get this, that he will end his particular life passing the circle of a melancholy island.
That is so incredibly specific. It's like he was reading the metadata of history.
But here's where we have to step back and look at the fallout. Because while these guys, Cagliostro, Cazzotte, they weren't necessarily cheering for the revolution, the world saw them as the architects of it.
Right, because people need a villain. And if you can't blame the hunger or the politics, you blame the secret societies.
Exactly. And the book introduces this heavy hitter, Abbé Barruel. He's this priest who fled to England because the revolution destroyed everything in France. And he goes on this, well, it's a 4-volume crusade. He claims the revolution was a deliberate dark conspiracy by these occult groups.
He sounds intense. The author says his language is passionate and fervent.
Fervent is a polite way to put it. He calls the Jacobins a devouring sect that emerged from the earth to destroy the altar and the throne. He's basically painting a picture of a supernatural invasion of politics.
It's that classic us versus them coding. But wait, the book says even Barruel, in his own writing, admits he was actually invited into a Masonic lodge.
Yeah, he tells the story where he's at a dinner, and suddenly they're trying to initiate him. He's resisting, refusing to take oaths, and the venerable master of the lodge gets so angry he tells him, "Our sword will not be our sword if you are not ready to cut the throat of a traitor."
Okay, that is not a peace and love vibe. That is definitely not the equality and liberty we were talking about earlier.
And that's the tension. Barruel is using this terrifying imagery to prove his point, but the author is careful here. He notes that while Barruel's hatred might have stimulated his imagination to a high level of fantasy, there's a grain of truth in the chaos.
So the algorithm was working even if the conspiracy part was exaggerated?
Precisely. The book makes this brilliant point. It says that while there wasn't a secret plot to overthrow the monarchy in the way Barruel claimed, the Masonic lodges were acting like a laboratory.
A testing ground?
Exactly. Like a parliamentary committee for ideas, they took these abstract, lofty concepts, liberty, equality, democracy, and they didn't just talk about them, they practiced them. They turned philosophy into a practical political program.
So they weren't the ones pulling the trigger, but they were the ones building the guns out of ideas.
That's a perfect way to put it. They were paving the road to the revolution. They provided the intellectual infrastructure.
It's wild. The lodges were these unique social spaces where a nobleman and a merchant could actually sit at the same table as equals, while the rest of France was still stuck in this rigid old world hierarchy.
It was a crack in the foundation, and once that crack is there, the whole structure is vulnerable to the storm. So, we've established that the revolution was a massive, chaotic crack in the foundation. But look at how the Masons actually tried to code their way into the new system.
You mean like a software patch for the monarchy?
Exactly. The book mentions 1789, when the king calls the Estates General, and instead of just protesting in the streets, the Masons used these things called cahiers de doléances.
Lists of grievances.
Right, they were basically suggestion boxes posted at every polling station. And the author notes that the speed and persuasiveness of these lists shows the Masons had been preparing for a long time to spread their ideas of liberty and equality.
So they weren't just reacting to the revolution, they were preloading the data.
Precisely. But then the algorithm loses control. The revolution accelerates, the terror hits, and suddenly even the Masons can't stop the momentum. The book says the terror, especially the king's execution, was incompatible with the civilized creed of most Masons.
I mean, if you're a Mason and you value order and debate, watching a guillotine become the primary way to resolve political disputes, yeah, that's a system crash.
In that vacuum, it's where things get weird. The skepticism that birthed Masonry starts morphing into these strange new cults.
Like the cult of the Constitution?
Yeah, it's wild. The book describes it set by Marie-Joseph Saint-Pierre to replace Christ with the Constitution as the source of all goodness. They were literally trying to sanctify a legal document.
Imagine a mask where the priest just reads the Bill of Rights and then burns incense to the preamble.
It was even more theatrical than that. The author describes a ceremony on the Champ de Mars where 400 priests wore tricolor sashes over their robes, and Lafayette, the hero of the Revolution, was there, swearing oaths to the nation, the law, and the king.
It's such a mess of old and new. It's like someone trying to run Windows 11 on a steam engine.
And that mess is the hallmark of this era. The book calls it the paradox of reason, this uniquely French tendency to turn everything into a performance. They even had a cult of reason, where they built a temple to philosophy and had actresses dressed in white and azurous playing the role of reason herself.
Wait, so they were literally playing dress up with the concept of logic?
They were. They had processions of girls marching around, saluting a flame of truth. It's highly irrational, but they were using religious forms to teach a secular idea.
It's ironic. They hated the old church, but they couldn't stop using the vibe of the church to make their new ideas stick.
Exactly. And after the Terror, you get this period of religious anarchy. Enter the Théophilanthropes.
Now that name sounds like something from a bad sci-fi movie.
It's actually a pretty clever attempt at universal programming. Their goal was a religion with zero secrecy. No priests, no rituals, no exclusive vibes. They wanted a morality that every sect could agree on.
So like a much more boring version of everything?
Pretty much. Their code was just a mashup of the best bits of everything. They quote Confucius on pride, then use an ancient Indian sage to talk about social responsibility. It was a spiritual aggregator.
It's like a Wikipedia of morality.
And while it sounds naive, the book argues it was a massive precedent. It was the first real move toward religious syncretism, that way of blending everything together, decades before the Theosophical Society ever showed up.
So even if the Théophilanthropes failed, they laid the groundwork for the spiritual melting pot of the later 19th century.
They did, but then the scene shifts again. We move from these universal group efforts to the individual influencers of the occult. And this brings us back to one name, Coeur de Gébelin.
The guy who was wung up from Mesmer's mysticism?
The same. The book tells this great anecdote about him. He showed up to a doctor with a face yellow as quince and legs that had been cold as ice for 25 years. After a session with Mesmer, he claims he felt like a 15-year-old again.
Okay, I'll admit, if a treatment can make me feel 15 again, I'd be a believer too.
But here's the real kicker. His physical recovery isn't the important part, it's the text he wrote. He published this massive work, Le Monde Primitif, which was basically a claim that he had discovered a hidden ancient truth.
And let me guess he found it in a deck of cards?
He did. He claimed that the Tarot was actually a hidden repository of ancient Egyptian wisdom, an Egyptian book that had been hiding in plain sight, disguised as a mere set of fancy pictures.
That is such a classic move. It's a sacred code from the Pharaohs.
And the magic worked. Even though other scholars mocked his superficial erudition, his claim about the tarot captured the entire imagination of the occult world. He turned a deck of playing cards into a cosmic library.
And he wasn't alone, right? The book mentions this guy, Eliot.
Ah, yes, the master of the rebranding. He was a math tutor in Paris who realized math didn't pay the bills, so he turned to card reading. He used an anagram of his name. Eliot became Étteilla.
A math tutor turned occultist. Now that is a pivot I can get behind.
He basically took Gébelin's Egyptian theory and ran with it, adding astrology, alchemy, and chiromancy into the mix. He was the next step in the algorithm.
I need a quick stretch. My back is actually killing me from that last yoga flow.
Good idea. Let's take 5 and reset.